we have to be open-minded enough to learn and appreciate other cultures. And I think it's important to recognize the importance of Black history outside of just 1 month of the year. Even if, we don't necessarily subscribe to some of the things that we see and hear, we have to make sure that we confront those folks that, have those ideologies that really do damage to the beauty of diversity and the appreciation of cultural differences. Well, hello, I'm Dr. Dred Scott. I'm currently the president and CEO of Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City. We have 12 program locations across the Kansas City Metro. We work with youth ages 5 to 18 to develop the skills, values, and self-esteem to achieve their greatest dreams. I've been in this role for nearly 3 years. My formal professional experience prior to the clubs has all been in public school education. So I'm a former elementary teacher, believe it or not. I taught fourth grade for 4.5 years. Went back to school, earned a master's degree, was given the tremendous opportunity to become an elementary principal at the Rifle 26 in the Raytown School District. Worked there for 5 years at Eastwood Hills Elementary. Then was promoted to a central office administrative position, dealing with the operations of the district. So I did that for 2 years, went back to school, earned the doctorate degree, was recruited away to the Independent School District, where I worked for 10 years, 9 years as deputy superintendent, responsible for all things related to curriculum, instruction, and assessment, pre-K through 12. So that's my professional journey. I live in Independence. I've lived there for almost 18 years. I have 3 children, 2 sons. One is out of school. The other is a senior this year. And our only daughter, our youngest, is an 8th grader in Independence as well. My wife works for Community America Credit Union and has had some responsibilities in Independence as well. Yeah, absolutely. So, my parents, I guess, set me up for success there. I will tell you this, though. Early on, as a youth, I didn't necessarily appreciate my name because it was so unique. I've always known the history of Dred Scott and his legacy, and of course, the U.S. Supreme Court case and the famous decision there, the infamous decision related to that court case. I've known that history since, I could probably walk and talk. My parents were very intentional behind that. So I knew it was a big deal to be named after someone with such a great legacy. But as a kid, a great example of, kind of an awkward things that would happen is like on my bicycle, I wanted a tiny little license plate with my name on it to hang on the back of my seat. And so you go into the neighborhood store and I would see Chris and Dan and Mark. There was never a Dred. And so, it really wasn't until early adulthood that I started to really appreciate the name and again, feeling the responsibility of the legacy. I am very fortunate in that when I meet individuals, most people can remember my name, which works to my advantage. 2, it's an interesting conversation piece, and it gives me an opportunity to maybe educate someone that is not familiar with the name and the history there. So, the responsibility that I feel, it's definitely there as a Black man, in the United States carrying that name. You can't be a slouch with a name like Dred Scott. There's some responsibility that comes with that. I would say the long and short of it is we're more tuned in to Black history and issues that have an impact on the Black community. We're tuned in more now than we ever were before. I don't want to keep reaching back to my childhood, but my exposure to Black history was completely different than what kids today have access to. So I learned thanks to two very intentional parents. I learned through stories and conversations with them. I learned through books, encyclopedias, and a few printed materials that were made available to me. Today's Black youth, they have access to information right at their fingertips with smartphones and devices that are out there. And so they are able to readily access that information, and it's done so almost instantaneously. And therefore, they are able to form their own thoughts and opinions and feelings about, the history and also, incidents that impact them and those that look like them. And so I think that's a good thing at the end of the day, that they can access that information in their own way and frame it in the way that they need to, where it makes sense, and it kind of cuts out the middleman, kind of putting together the story based on their unique perspective. So I appreciate that. One of the challenges of that instant information is our young people are not always equipped to know what to do with that information. If you think about this past summer and the uprisings related to George Floyd's murder, and just the outpouring and the outcrying of concerns really that were felt across the world, the expansiveness of that response and reaction was directly related to people's ability to tap in and watch that that horrific scene for themselves, and also see the reaction and the impact on communities around them. And so it served as a motivator and an instigator to response. But the concern is, our young people need folks that have the experience and the wisdom to guide them to respond to those kinds of issues constructively, and approaching it in ways that result in real change, as opposed to just showing up at a certain location in the city, protesting with signs, yelling, screaming, and then moving on to business as usual the next day. Yeah, great question. And I think there are some interesting parallels that can be drawn. If you go back to the civil rights era of the 1950s and 60s, that was being led in large part by young people. And I think sometimes that fact gets lost. I mean, there were teenagers and college students out there on the front lines, demanding change and taking real action towards that. So I think it's a neat parallel to draw between those times and where we are today. Again, the movements that we've seen here recently have been championed by young people. And so, they're not waiting for someone to tell them this is important or this is what you should do. They're making those decisions for themselves. And I think that's a good thing. And again, like I said, in response to the last question, I think it's important for us to, the older generations, to wrap our arms around this younger generation and help support them in their efforts. Here's a great example. So in the clubs this summer, we invited teens from across the Kansas City Metro to come in for listening sessions that we hosted at our locations across the city. Well-attended events. I mean, we had to maintain social distancing because we were still, of course, operating during the pandemic. So we had upwards of 25, 30 teens show up to these listening sessions. And again, they were tuned in, they were well-informed, and they had formulated their own opinions about things. And so rather than approach those sessions as, we're going to tell you what you need to know and how you should feel, we wanted to listen and then look for those opportunities to provide guidance. So during those sessions, we determined that our young people didn't have a good sense of the political process, particularly at the local level. And so we seized the moment to really educate them on the importance of being a registered voter and practicing voting on a regular basis, not just for the presidential elections that happen every 4 years, but elections that happen every year, at the local level, state level, and then, at the federal level as well. And so an outcome from those sessions was a real emphasis on getting young people registered to vote. So we work again with kids ages 5 to 18. So every year we have an opportunity with a group of our members to get them registered. And we did that this year. And we supported them in getting educated on the process, getting educated on those that were running for office and those issues that were on the ballot, and supported them in getting to the polls so that they could express and utilize their rights. And so it was a great example of young people wanting to do something, but not quite knowing everything that was out there, and us just listening, looking for that opportunity to educate and motivate. And we got the results of that. So very proud of that. Yeah, representation matters. And so the fact that, Black and brown children can see someone that looks like them and sounds like them, that they can identify with in some of the highest offices of the nation and on some of the largest platforms available in the world, it's an inspiration to them. It tells them, no matter, what I might look like or sound like or where I come from, I have the opportunity to aspire and achieve great things. I mean, that's what we're all about with the Boys and Girls Clubs of Greater Kansas City, giving access to brighter and greater futures for our young people. So, I harken back to my time as a teacher in the classroom. I happened to work in Raytown School District at that time, being a first-tier suburb of Kansas City. The demographics were such that there wasn't a lot of diversity when it came to the student body, and definitely not for the professional staff. I was the only African American or Black teacher in my building, and there were students in that building that hadn't been exposed to a Black educator and a Black professional. And there were students that were Black and brown that had never had a Black teacher, let alone a male teacher. And so I saw the impact that I had on those young people because they got to see me and get a sense of who I was and my culture and, the things that I presented as an educated professional. And I'm proud to think that I had a positive impact on all kids so that they could see, no matter who you are, what you look like, you can achieve great things. And so that representation, those lessons I learned early in my career helped kind of shape my philosophy around ensuring that young people have the opportunity to see all colors, shapes, creeds, cultures in a positive light so that they never limit themselves based on these preconceived notions or generalizations that unfortunately continue to exist in our society.
So one last thing, what do you want our young people today to take away from Black History Month every year, much less this year alone?
Yeah, I think the takeaway is it's important for us to know our history. And so to be aware of those that came before us, that sacrificed before us, and to recognize what they fought for and the rights and things that we get to enjoy today are because of their hard work and sacrifice and courageousness to step out and lead and push for change. So it's always important to recognize that and appreciate that. But I think the second takeaway would be the youth and young people are creating their history right now. And, you only get to be young once. I prided myself for a long time of being, a young guy, young professional. And before I know it, I looked up and I'm knocking on the door of 50. And so I'm not so young anymore, right? And so you think back on, all right, what impact, what difference did I make? When you're young, you're fearless, you are idealistic. You have the energy and the time and the freedom to really go out there and make a difference. And so I think the takeaway is seize the moment as a young person, be courageous enough to step out there and shape the future while you have a chance, and make a brighter pathway for the next generation. Because time flies. You're never going to be young again. I mean, you can be young at heart, but you only have one opportunity to really take advantage of the energy and the passion that only comes with you.